Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. From the tops of the Green Mountains to Vermont's valleys, UVM researchers are making discoveries and gathering data that changes how we see our world every day. Today, we bring you a story about the lowliest and perhaps one of the most detestable of insects, and a researcher whose work elevates this lowly creature to lofty heights by helping us better understand that even the filthiest bug plays a pivotal role in human health and the health of our world. It's a story we're calling Meet the Beetles. Here's Keith Silva.
A warm summer day, sound of cows munching on grass, an otherwise idyllic setting until perhaps you learn what researcher Bryony Sands is looking for as she walks through this pasture.
One of the ways that we can just see if we've got dung beetles and what we might have is to just come into the pasture and find some dung. Dung beetles will colonise dung within minutes sometimes, and we can immediately start to see we have got dung beetles in there.
Sands is a postdoc research fellow at UVM's Dung Institute. She's in Vermont to study her passion, dung beetles.
I do love talking about them because I think they're really important, but yeah, some people think it's really cool and other people are kind of put off by the dung side of it. So much poop.
Dung beetles may have a dirty job, but as the saying goes, somebody's got to do it.
Dung beetles are really important in agricultural ecosystems. I think they're definitely underappreciated, but they provide some really important ecosystem services. And I think when people think about ecosystem services and insects, the sort of first thing that you'd go to is pollination. But there are other really important ecosystem services, and dung beetles provide the service of decomposition.
Dung beetles are found on every continent except Antarctica.
It's a type of scarab beetle, and they do come in sort of lots of different shapes and sizes. In warmer climates, such as Africa, as you might have seen on sort of nature documentaries, there are some really big species that sort of roll balls of dung around. In Vermont, there are mainly two groups. So the dung beetles that live in the dung on the surface, and then there's the burying dung beetles, which are really important because they make tunnels underneath the dung and drag the dung down into the soil.
They're fertilizing the soil.
Exactly. Yeah, but all the fresh pasture makes the dung really watery.
In order to catch and study the beetles, Sands and her team of undergraduate UVM students set traps.
We take a small bucket, or these are plant pots, and we bury them flush with the soil. And then we collect some fresh cow dung. It has to be fresh because dung beetles are only attracted to fresh dung. We put some chicken wire over the top of the buried bucket, and then we form sort of a fake cow pat over that. And then the dung beetles obviously smell the dung and they fly in and burrow down and fall through into the bucket underneath. And then we can collect them and see what species we've got.
Beyond beetles, Sands studies the complex connections between plants, animals, and insects.
This summer we're doing a project looking at integrated parasite management, and that is basically looking at a suite of techniques that can control the parasites instead of relying on the chemicals. And part of that is looking at farms that are using different strategies, sort of grazing strategies, to control parasites. And we are looking at dung beetle populations on these farms. We're also looking at pest fly populations and the internal parasites of the cows. And just trying to get a picture of which sort of parasite management strategies can be beneficial for the insects and also help to control the parasites.
Pests, parasites, and pastures. Sands' research looks to develop a snapshot of on-farm biodiversity.
Biodiversity basically refers to not just like the abundance of insects that you might find, but the different species that there are. So all of the different species have different ecological roles. For example, in terms of the dung beetles, like I said, some of them just live on the surface, some of them bury the dung. And so it's sort of those different ecological functions that are very important when we're thinking about biodiversity. And what we want to see is not just a lot of dung beetles, but a good variety of these different species, which are all providing slightly different ecosystem services on the pasture.
And have you been seeing those in your research?
Yeah, we have. So we've been finding lots of different exciting species of dung beetles, lots of the burying beetles, and also the ones that live in the dung as well, and lots of different predatory beetles as well, which has been fun.
Sands' research will give Vermont farmers a better perspective on how beneficial insects like the dung beetle can prove and improve pest management practices and reduce reliance on chemical inputs.
There's obviously a lot of cattle in Vermont, and there's a lot of farmers who graze their cattle, which is really great. So the sort of aim of this project in terms of helping farmers is to find out which combinations of management strategies are effective in sort of promoting beneficial insects and suppressing pests and parasites on pastures. And it's important sort of now in terms of changing climates and changing ecosystems that farmers have sort of a suite of tools that they can use to tackle things like pests and parasites instead of just relying on one thing, which, you know, when something goes wrong, it's important to have lots of different things that we know can support these healthy ecosystems.
Sands has a doctorate in agroecology from the University of Bristol in the United Kingdom. Her decision to further her research in Vermont, to gain experience and independence in her career, was both an academic and practical pursuit.
I'd completed a postdoc in the UK and then was sort of looking for another position. And yeah, I just saw this postdoc in regenerative agriculture advertised, and it looked like a fantastic opportunity. And Vermont seems to be the place to be for sort of agricultural research. So yeah, I took the leap. And I think UVM, particularly the Dung Institute where I work, is really good in sort of valuing the contribution that postdocs bring. You know, we're doing a lot of research, we're sort of out there in the field, and I think I feel very supported in the Dung Institute in this sort of phase where I'm sort of learning to gain my own independence.
Bryony Sands' research benefits beetles and bugs, and academics and agriculture. And that's no bull. In Aalborg, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Keith. And joining me is Sands postdoc research advisor, the Dung Institute fellow, and UVM extension agronomist, Heather Darby. Thank you so much for talking with us, Heather.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So what has Sands' research on dung beetles brought to your research on soil quality and nutrient management?
As you can see, quite a bit. Really exciting research that I have never really delved into. I've done a lot of work, you know, really focusing on how field crop practices impact soil health, really looking at much smaller biological organisms in the soil like fungi and bacteria. But this is a whole new realm for us, and very exciting to have Dr. Sands and her experience here in Vermont.
It was interesting to me that Sands came to UVM because she answered an ad for a postdoc position in regenerative agriculture. So I'd like to hear from you a definition of regenerative agriculture and explain how it's different from sustainable agriculture.
Yeah, so, you know, these are all words used to describe how we manage systems. And regenerative is, I would say, not a new word, of course, but a new concept or newer concept that we're using in the field of agriculture to describe how we want to manage and treat systems. And that's really how we've used sustainable as well. So if you just think about the words sustainable and sustaining, it's really been focused on maintaining a system and not degrading it.
Mm.
And where regenerative is really looking at applying practices that restore and also, build and enhance agricultural systems. So they're not completely different, and actually they fit together quite well. And regenerative agriculture and the practices that we use in regenerative agriculture should be a part of an overall farm sustainability plan. So, they're different in some ways, but really, work together and complement each other in other ways as well.
Right, and as a UVM researcher who oversees several research projects and grants, quickly, what do postdocs like Sand provide that you might not be able to do on your own? It seems like much more common at UVM to have these postdocs.
Yeah, so postdocs, it should be beneficial to everybody, both to the researcher that's really trying to gain more experience and build their own program, and then also to the supervisor, such as myself, and the mentor. This is just added a whole new level of research and also extension and outreach to our farming community. So this is not an area of expertise currently that we have in extension. And so not only is Bryony, conducting new and novel research that will be, put out into the entire world, but what she's doing is really important to the agricultural community here as well, and new information for the farmers.
And I assume this will also help not only those who are grazing, but also people who are using conventional dairy practices where use of antibiotics might be common. Is it also going to be helpful for them?
Yeah, so her research is focused specifically on parasites and also beetles that are present because there is grazing. So any of our grazing operations in Vermont, whether they're using organic techniques or conventional techniques, or maybe a beef farm or a sheep farm, they're all grazing.
Stay in touch.
That's the focus.
Heather, we're all out of time. Thank you so much for being with us. And Heather and her team at Borderview Farm in Alburgh have several ongoing on-farm research projects. To learn more, you can visit UVM Extension Northwest Crops and Soils webpage with right there on your screen, uvm.edu/extension/NW Crops. And thank you once again for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.